I'm Bridget Bennett. I'm Professor of American Literature and Culture in the School of English at the University of Leeds, and I'm going to be talking about the art of comparison. Comparison is a technique or method we're all familiar with. It's a way of describing one thing in terms of one or more other things. If I was asked to describe something to you now, I'd probably start by listing a set of positive attributes, characteristics or properties which it had and which help define it. In this way, I could give a sense of what it was like using recognisable characteristics. I might go on to cite some negative attributes, characteristics or properties which it did not have. Finally, I might compare it with something else. That table has 4 legs. It is rectangular. It has a flat surface. These are all positive claims. It does not have 3 legs. It is not circular. It does not have a sloping surface. These are negative claims. It does not look like that chest of drawers because it has no drawers, but it does resemble that desk because they're both made of oak. I think we could easily come up with a list of comparisons which use this basic technique. But there are other ways of comparing things too. And we all compare things all the time and use comparison routinely. But how many of us reflect on how we construct our comparisons and what they're reliant on? Since we've all regularly been comparing things all our lives and putting these comparisons into language from an early age, the processes by and through which we do this seem to be naturalized. But we should remember that comparison is a learned thing as well as a complex one. What are we doing when we make comparisons then? And how can comparison be a tool to help elucidate literary texts? It would make no sense to someone who didn't share my understanding of shapes to call a table rectangular or circular. In using these shape names, I assume that most of us can imagine a rectangle or a circle. Someone who could not count might be baffled by me citing the number of legs on a table. Comparison usually relies on some basic assumptions of shared familiarity then. If I compare 2 things, I'll use examples that will work according to the context and listeners or readers. This is something which we all do all the time. We think about our audiences and tailor our comparisons accordingly if we want to be understood. We adapt ourselves all the time to the varied contexts and situations we find ourselves in, using assumptions about what will work and how and why it will work. It's not just that we say that we craft, but how we say it. It is not just what we say that we craft, but how we say it. Let's take another example then, say my office, in which I generally teach students. I start by describing my office. I give it a large frame of reference and then I move to more minute details. I work in the School of English at the University of Leeds. The buildings in which the School of English is housed are on 2 sides of a small road. They're largely, though not exclusively, terraces, which were once houses. There are 6 such houses, and most of our offices, though not all of them, are in these houses. The evenly numbered buildings 6, 8 and 10 are on one side of the road. The oddly numbered buildings 5, 7 and 9 are on the other. My office is in one of the oddly numbered buildings. Now you have a general sense of where it's situated. Depending on what I want to convey, I can give more or less of this type of information. I've already made a series of choices about what I want to tell you and how I want to do it. Having contextualised it in this broad way, I'll now move on to a more detailed description. My office is on the ground floor of 7 Clarendon Road. Since the house number is 7, the office number is 2, and the floor is the ground floor, my office number is 7G02. It's the second door on the left as you enter the main door to the building. It has a brown door and a green carpet. It's square and quite sizable. It's big enough to accommodate 2 desks and a number of chairs which students sit on during seminars, as well as books, filing cabinets, and everything else I need to teach students. It has 3 big windows which face out across an area of grass and trees and then onto a car park. As there's no traffic immediately outside the office, it's very quiet. Now all this gives a general sense of where the office is situated and what it's like. Depending on who I'm speaking to and what I wish to emphasise, I can decide which details are the most important. To someone simply wanting to meet me at the office, I'm most likely to tell them which side of the road it's on and which floor they should go to. I'll give them the details of the address. To someone who wants to know what kind of a space my office is to work in, what it feels like to be there, I might emphasise the quiet, the view, the light, and so on. I choose what I emphasise according to the particular context and situation then, and all of these things describe my office, but in different ways. As a speaker, I make choices about what I think is most significant or meaningful. And we might say that making these choices and putting them together in certain ways is more than just a technique. It's starting to resemble an art. It relies on many subtleties, choices, emphases, and juxtapositions. Crucially, I have to decide what information is most important to whoever it's aimed at. This is something which, if I'm skilled at descriptions, I'll be self-conscious about. So far what I'm doing is describing my office. Implicitly, though, I'm also comparing it with other offices within the School of English. Those on the other side of the road, those which are on the second floor or have blue carpets, say, those which are noisy, and so on. Equally, and in an even larger frame, I'm invoking broader ideas of what offices are, so that my description moves beyond something quite local to a more generalised picture. Again, depending on who my intended audience is, I can vary the information I give and the ways and forms in which I deliver it. To keep it simple though, let's assume that the immediacy of other offices within my workplace are particularly relevant to me as I outline the characteristics of my office. Here's a description of my previous office, couched in the same patterns and language I've already used. My previous office is on the ground floor of 6 Clarendon Road. Since the house number is 6, the office number is 2, and the floor is the ground floor, my office number is written as 6G02. It's the second door on the right as you enter the main door to the building. It has a brown door and a red carpet. It is square and medium-sized. It's big enough to accommodate one desk and a number of chairs which students sit on during seminars, as well as books, a filing cabinet, and everything else I need to teach students. It has one window which faces out onto a road. As there's quite a lot of traffic immediately outside the office, it is not very quiet. Now, if we put these two descriptions together, we can start to compare the offices. And in order to do this, we need to think about the details they each rely on. They're on opposite sides of the road to each other in different buildings. Both are on the ground floor. The old office is on the right as you enter the building, and the new office is on the left. The old office has a red carpet, the new one a green carpet. The old office is smaller, darker, and noisier than the new one, with a less attractive view from the window. We're now collecting information, which will help us not just with comparing the two offices, but in moving to new levels of interpretation. For instance, the fact that the new office is quiet, light, has an attractive view, might lead us to infer that these are qualities I wish to draw attention to. They are. It's why I moved offices. If I hadn't told you how and why I'd chosen to move, you might now be wondering about that. In other words, you would be starting to think beyond what is overtly expressed in these descriptions to what might else be inferred. While I've put this in rather simplistic terms, the ways that a text or statement might both say things and not say things, might have to be probed to find its meanings, is crucial to interpreting literary texts. The American writer Willa Cather wrote of this in these words: "Whatever is felt upon the page without being specifically named there, that, one might say, is created. It is the inexplicable presence of the thing not named, of the overtone divined by the ear but not heard by it, the verbal mood, the emotional aura of the fact or the thing or the deed, that gives high quality to the novel or the drama, as well as to poetry itself." Equally and perfectly validly, you might be starting to wonder about whether I am telling you the truth or not. Do you trust me? Is my narration reliable? Can you believe what I'm telling you, or am I trying to mislead you? This question of the reliability or unreliability of the narrator is also important in understanding and interpreting literary texts. The term the unreliable narrator was coined by Wayne C. Booth in his influential book The Rhetoric of Fiction. But as we see here, both the thing not named and the unreliable narrator might be important in interpreting and understanding something as apparently ordinary as my description of my office. So, do you trust me? What we're doing now is moving from the statement of certain facts, and as I've already suggested, those facts are carefully chosen according to context, to the interpretation of those facts. In other words, we're trying to see what those facts mean, what information they're presenting us with, what we can do with that information, how we can use it, in other words. So, we are now thinking about the art of comparison. Now, what this involves at its core is a fundamental tool of literary criticism, the close, the attentive reading of texts. This detailed reading, combined with thinking about different possible contexts, is vital. So an additional way we might think about the art of comparison is to consider the kinds of language used to describe things and how that might vary according to what is the subject of that description and of who's doing the describing. Now, as you'll remember, I used a repetitive formula to describe each office so that the descriptions mirrored each other. A lot might be said about the repeated use of the word it within each description, the relative paucity of adjectives, though I was describing something, and the structure of the sentences. The kind of reading in which you think about those details is what literary critics do when interpreting texts. It's what we're doing now.